There is a new Pew survey out that shows that global trust in Donald Trump is collapsing. It shows global confidence in Trump has dropped double digits in nearly every region. NATO allies do not trust America. Trade partners are distancing themselves, finding alternative routes. And even places like Hungary and Brazil are beginning to hedge their bets. And the world, sees what we see, an unstable figure obsessed with his ego and completely unpredictable. So, um, the strongman act is beginning to fail, and that was not just because he's slipping on stairs and um, getting into cat fights with Elon, but is if the globe is turning on him, what does that mean for domestic? Do Americans care? Or do we? You know, what do you make of that? What do you make of how that plays out uh, inside the U.S.?
Um, I think most people in the United States don't give a shit about any other country at all. I think a significant number of the United States couldn't find France on a map, and that's the most popular country I could think of. Maybe Italy because it's boot shaped, maybe.
They
And
like
I don't think
meetings, don't they?
it has no bearing on anything other than if the tariffs and this stuff and people have to pay more for Walmart stuff, that might you know get in there. But I think that the level of sophistication that you need to have in your thinking to understand, for example, why USAID is important and why soft power was important and why NATO is important and financing NATO is important. I think most Americans, or too many, I shouldn't say most, I should say too many Americans just don't have either the imagination or the patience to understand why that would be a thing. And I think if other countries don't like us, they will be like, good, this great, Trump, yeah, USA, we don't need you, or something. That's what I
Did
think.
we go to high school together? Seems so familiar to me. What about you, Lisa?
Well,
What does it mean?
I do agree with Greg that there is sort of a certain amount of ignorance and antipathy by some portion of Americans, some of whom do travel abroad and get reputations as ugly Americans for how they treat other people or are upset that other people don't speak their language. But I also think, this realignment that's happening because of Trump's just utter stupidity and contemptuousness for the international system that has created a lot of stability in the world, not complete stability. There's certainly been, I mean, the 20th century was a century of war. And, here we are a quarter way through the 21st century, and there are, numerous significant atrocities that have been committed that our international regime has not contained. And in fact, you had Donald Trump just in the past week or so assail the judges at the International Criminal Court, the Court of Criminal Justice for the world, like the World Court that polices crimes against humanity and human rights abuses. And you had Trump attacking 4 of the justices on that court, or assailing them for daring to try to hold Benjamin Netanyahu accountable in international court for his actions. You also had the Israeli Supreme Court for many months that was trying to hold Benjamin Netanyahu accountable for other reasons, and many protests in Tel Aviv about Netanyahu's the alleged criminal activities of Netanyahu before the crisis in Gaza. And so now what we're seeing on a broader scale is, first of all, you have this total hostility of Trump toward international international agreements, international institutions. And it's true that many American people don't even understand what those institutions are or that they exist. But some of those institutions Americans do know about, and they have helped keep the peace in certain parts of the world or help protect our security, like NATO. And the last sort of US entity that was super hostile to NATO was the John Birch Society, which was a totally discredited, ridiculous, operation. This saw communism in the Supreme Court and even in President Eisenhower, the former commander, the former Allied commander, that group that was co-founded by Fred Koch, Charles Koch's dad, that group that was funded by Fred Koch and Charles Koch, we have the documents to prove it. I unearthed those to show that Charles Koch was funding the Birchers in the 1960s as they attacked the United Nations, the US Supreme Court, and also Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. They were assailing the civil rights community and civil rights efforts to secure voting rights. That John Birch Society that was sort of laughed out of the room for asserting that the president was a communist. That's the group that really tried to take on the United Nations and NATO as supposedly bad ideas. But NATO has been a significant force for Europe and the US because of Russian ambitions for more domination. And as Greg has written extensively about in, I think, a couple books, at least one of which I've read, the most recent one, has really documented this, how Putin, Russia is post-communist in the sense that it's now, a kleptocracy, but it's not post-communist in the sense of Putin as a longtime communist who wants Russia to be seen as the dominant power in the world that it once was, and whose dominance is tied directly to trying to weaken and destabilize the United States. And if you were to map out, as Greg I think has done in different forms in both the newsletter and the books, if you were to map out like what are Putin's goals for America internationally, Trump's following the playbook to a T. It's like weaken our alliances, destroy our closest allies, those relationships, weaken NATO so that we're not funding it, so that he has free reign to sort of decide what part of Eastern Europe he wants to reclaim for the glory days of the old Soviet Union. Weaken the U.S. in terms of its international peace and humanitarian mission in countries in Africa and around the world. I mean, Trump is following that playbook as if he is a Russian stooge. Greg, what do you think about that?
It doesn't even matter what it's what he's doing. He's been doing it since 1980 something, and he's never wavered from it. I mean, and I keep saying this, but since NATO was founded in 1949, okay, we've had no major wars in Europe. I know there's been things in the Balkans and little things here and there, but there hasn't been a major war in Europe since 1949. The longest time, or the last time we had this long peace in that much of Europe was in the reign of Antonius Pius in the 2nd century AD. It is such a historical anomaly to have peace, to have France and Germany not fighting each other, to have France and England not fighting each other, to have Livonia and Russia not fighting each other or whatever. And it doesn't happen. And the reason, well, there's two. One, NATO. Two, America will kick your ass. Those are the two reasons. And everything else falls on the wayside. And Trump is basically single-handedly destroying both of those things. Now, where might this lead, I wonder?